So now let us look at advertising across the product life cycle. This is a concept which we'll be discussing in great detail in the coming classes. But at this point of time, in order to understand the role of advertising in the overall marketing strategy and the overall promotional mix, it is worthwhile to mention that any product has a life cycle, which we have studied as a student of marketing. We all know that a typical product life cycle looks like this, the one that you can see on the slide. There is an introduction stage, followed by the growth stage, followed by maturity stage, and a decline stage. This is a typical product life cycle curve. Now, a brand life cycle curve may not look like this. So there are many brands which are in perpetuity. What do we mean by perpetuity? That is, they are not in decline stage. Like, for example, you have brands like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, where the graph is not in a decline stage. The graph may be flat, it may be climbing upwards, or it may be slightly going down, but it is not in a decline stage. Decline stage is when the product has declined. Like, for example, VCDs, DVDs, they've all experienced decline now. So they followed the typical product life cycle curve. Pagers, traditional landline phones, VCRs, there's so many examples. FFST television sets, they've all followed the typical product life cycle curve. Now, what is interesting is that it is not about the product life cycle that we are interested in discussing and their types, but what is important is for us to understand that what is the role of advertising at each of these stages. So first we have to understand the product life cycle, and once we understand the product life cycle, we need to understand the brand life cycle. So before we will discuss these things in detail, but before we go ahead, let me just tell you very briefly that advertising strategies change as products move from one stage to another. So the advertising strategies which are required at the introduction stage are different from the advertising strategies which are required at the growth stage. Because what happens at a growth stage is what happens at the growth stage is completely different. And the entire market structure is different. The consumers are different. The competition is different. Similarly, at a maturity stage, things are completely different. And at decline stage, things are different. So we will discuss this one by one. So we've already had a look at the IDAS model. So we are not going to be discussing this now. We have already discussed that. So let's discuss very briefly each of these stages and how they are characterized. Now let's take the introduction stage. What happens in the introduction stage? Introduction stage is usually when we are talking of new to the world product. So what do we mean by new to the world product? A product which is not in existence. Like, for example, we had the VCRs, but prior to VCRs, we had those spool tapes or the traditional cinema. After VCRs, we had the cassette discs, CDs or VCDs. And after the CDs, we had DVDs. And after DVDs, for a very brief period of time, we had the LDs, the laser discs. And then they were replaced by pen drives and other portable media. So what is the idea here? The idea here is that a product is one which is introduced to the world. For our understanding, the product life cycle is created or invented for the first time, and consumers have no idea about that particular product. So when we have such a product, what are the characteristics of the introduction stage? That is what you need to understand. So whenever a product is introduced for the first time, that means in most cases, a lot of research. Like, for example, when mobile phones were introduced in the 90s and in India in 1990, it was a new to the world product. Nobody had heard of mobile phones before. Nobody had seen one. Nobody had used them. When plasma televisions were introduced in India for the first time in 2006-7, nobody had heard of plasma TV. Plasma, very short-lived period because they were very expensive, very energy, highly energy consuming. They were quickly replaced by similar looking technology which was called as LCD. Today, LCDs have been replaced by LEDs, and LEDs, they are undergoing, now you don't have plain LEDs, you have OLEDs and super OLEDs and things like that. Anyway, let's come back to the topic. So anything which is new has been introduced for the first time. What usually happens? Generally, the technology is proprietary. And when we say proprietary, it means there are only one or two people who might have been working on such a technology before the introduction. So, in terms of competition, you only have one competition. You do not have uh, or I shouldn't say one competition, or one competitor rather. You have very little competition because it could be you and somebody else, or it could be one company, the one that has introduced the pioneer, and somebody else who might have been working on the technology. But generally, there are very few in the introduction stage. So, this is the first thing. What happens in the introduction stage? I mean, it's a new to the world product. The consumers are already using a product for for that particular need or benefit. Like for example, before the advent of VCDs, we had VCRs. So consumers were already using VCRs. Then the VCD was introduced. Now what happens? There are very few customers at this point of time. Maybe one or two who might have heard of VCDs and they might think that VCD is something new. Let us buy it. It does a lot of things for us. By the way, it also depends on the type of product. Some products are very, very revolutionary. That is, that they change the way you work and operate, and the benefits are obvious from right from the start. So you had the landline phones in India, and you had the mobile phone come in. So you did not need to educate the consumer as far as what a mobile phone is in terms of the technology. Everybody knew what mobile phones could do for them. And Indian masses were fed up with the regular landline phones, which would go kaput during summers or extreme rains, and most of the time they never used to work, or I should say they used to work only half of the time, and you had to run pillar to post to get the connection restored and the line fixed. So you had to contact the lineman and probably, resort to some unfair methods in order to get him to, expedite uh, the repairs or whatever it would be. So to restore your connection, it was a difficult thing. So when mobile phones came to India, they were pretty expensive. But each and everybody knew what mobile phone could do for you, how it would revolutionize your life. Same was the case with, to some extent, with the case of VCR to VCDs, or regular cassette tapes, audio cassette tapes, or video cassette tapes to VCD. Everybody knew to an extent, not the way it was in the case of mobile phone, but in the case of VCDs. Everybody knew that it would revolutionize your life because there were a lot of issues with the regular, magnetic tapes that were used in VCRs, tracking and deterioration in terms of quality and things like that. But in many instances, you need to educate the consumer. So there was a intervening period as far as the Indian telecommunication story is concerned. So let me not jump the gun and come straight away to mobile phones. Let me go back to the example. And the example is of pagers. So before mobile phones, we had pagers. Now, pager was something which not many people were aware of. They are still not aware of today what exactly was pager. So pager was a device which would be you would keep on your person, and you would get a message on that pager that Mr. X and Y and Z wants to call you, and the number of the gentleman or the lady would be given to you, or the party would be given to you, and you can go to the nearest booth and call them up. Now the problem with pager was that it was not instantaneous communication. It would take some time, but then to convey this to people, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of time and effort. So you had to educate the consumer that what exactly a pager is. So the company which launched the pager services for the first time in India, they spent a huge amount of money in educating the consumer. So in the introduction stage, they were the only company, they were the pioneers, they were the only company. They educated the consumers. Oh yes, there is something called as a pager, and there is a paging service. And they explained the benefits to the consumers. So what happened? They educated the consumer about pagers, what pager technology is, what is the benefit of having a pager, and they explained why you should buy a pager from them. because they were the pioneers. Probably one or two companies, after seeing that one company has already spent a huge amount of money and it has done the job for us, we don't have to spend too much, they enter the market. This is usually the case. Whenever a new product is launched in the market, there are many, I shouldn't say many, at least one or two rivals who are sitting on the sidelines waiting and watching whether the product is going to become successful or not. And once they see that the pioneer has spent a huge amount of money in advertising about or educating the consumer, and the product has caught the fancy of the audience, and more customers start trickling in, they jump into the marketplace. And this leads to what we call as the growth stage. So as we can see from this slide, we can see from the introduction, we move towards the growth stage. And what happens in a growth stage? More and more customers realize that yes, this product is of benefit to us, they move here. So what happens in the growth stage? What kind of advertising do we have in the growth stage? So growth stage, we still have to educate a lot of customers, but the cost of education is now being borne by your rivals also. So it is informative advertising. At the same point of time, you are trying to tell the consumer, now you are no more the pioneer because you have a little amount of what you call as competition, and you have little amount of competition which is growing. So more and more rivals are coming in that particular industry. So what you have to convince the consumer is about two things: that go for pagers, or for example, if it is mobile phone, go for mobile phone telephony, or go for a VCD, or go for a DVD, or whatever be the new product category. You should try this because it has better, it has so many benefits over the previous one product that you were using. And when you decide to buy a VCD or a DVD or a pager, please buy my product. Please buy my brand. So that is the job of the company at this particular stage. So the growth stage is not a very small stage. So growth to maturity, this is where you have the maximum amount of competition. What happens at the next stage? That is the maturity stage. So what happens at the maturity stage? At the maturity stage, it is characterized by a market which has become mature. What do we mean by a mature market? A mature market is one, and what is the difference between a growth market and a mature market? That is the question that you have to ask yourself, and you probably want to ask me. Let me explain this. A growth market is the one where the market has a lot of potential. What do I mean by potential? There are, let's say that the market, I just give a hypothetical example that there are 1 million people in that particular market. Now, out of that 1 million, only 1,000 are using mobile phones. That means there is a huge number which is yet to use mobile phones, and that market has got potential. That if you are able to convince them, all those who can buy, all those who can afford, that is 1 million. So that the market is very, very big. That's called as a growth market, or market which has a lot of growth potential, because a minuscule amount of people, or the minuscule percentage of the market, is actually using the product, and rest of the people can be converted to use the product. What is it? Mature market. Mobile telephony in India is a mature market. Toothpaste is a mature market. Generally, all those who can use toothpaste or who can buy toothpaste are using toothpastes. All those who can afford a mobile phone are using a mobile phone. So these are called as mature. So mobile telephony in India is mature. So where do sales come from? Sale comes from replacement sales. So my mobile has become old, I buy a new one. My mobile is outdated, I buy a new one. My mobile is broken, I buy a new one. My mobile is uh, let's say stolen, I buy a new one. So that is where the sale comes from. So you generally replacement sales. People are dying, younger people are entering the market. So as they mature, they buy the brand, they buy mobile phones. The people, so this is kind of replacement sale. That's the cycle of life. So a mature market is one. What happens in a mature market? You don't have too much of competition. What happens over a period of time? When it's a growth market, you make supernormal profits. So this is the interesting phenomenon. When the market is growing and it has a lot of potential and the product is revolutionary, What happens? Consumers flock to buy that product. Today, mobile telephony is so cheap. You get a recharge of 300 and you get unlimited calls and you get 100 GB of data every day. So cheap. But in 1996, when I took up my first job, for 100 hours of internet, you had to pay 22,000 rupees to VSNL in Delhi, that is Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited. What does it tell you? 22,000 then is probably more than 2.2 lakh rupees today. Huge amount. The salaries of a marketing executive, fresh marketing executive, was 3,000 rupees then. So just imagine. So today, the salary of a fresh marketing executive could be, depending on the break, depending on, I would say in some instances it could be 80, 90, 1 lakh also. In some cases it could be 30,000. So it was 10 times. So today, mobile telephony is very, very cheap. Everybody can afford a mobile phone. At least not mobile phone, the services. Because they're pretty cheap. What is 300 rupees? But what is interesting to note is that in the maturity stage, what happens is that because the market is not super normal, just because the market is very, very big, the profit margins are huge. Or overall profit, I should say, is huge, not the profit margin. Profit margins are very high in the growth stage, in the introduction stage. In the maturity stage, what is Reliance making per customer? What is Airtel making per customer? If you were to compare this with the profits that might have been making in the growth stage, very small, very small profit per customer these days. But if you look at the number of customers that you have, that is very, very huge. So what happens now? Maturity stage is there is a characteristic of that particular stage. What is maturity stage? Maturity stage is characterized by few companies, but these are strong, solid companies who over a period of time have built a huge market share in that particular industry. There are no new customers coming in. Similarly, there are no new companies coming in that particular segment. Similarly, all those who could not do well in that particular industry leave that industry. So in the maturity stage, it is all about creating a brand preference, which was also the case in the case of growth stage. But here you try to highlight features and attributes and more benefits so that people buy your brand vis-a-vis your rival brand. That's the basic idea. What happens in a decline stage? In a decline stage, the product has lost, the fancy of the audience. A newer product has come into the marketplace. A newer technology has come into the marketplace, which has replaced the existing product which you were using. For example, nobody buys, the traditional television sets that we had. Nobody buys a full flat square television set that we have today. Nobody buys them. The reason, they become outdated. Newer technology like LED has, or I should say, OLED has come in. So if you want to buy a television, you will buy 4K technology, you will buy an 8K technology, you will buy OLED. You will not want to buy the traditional television set, those big bulky ones, because their days are gone. You will not buy VCR, you will not buy a DVD, you will not buy a VCD. Then what happens in the decline stage? In decline stage, there are a few customers, few organizations, few potential customers. Organizations are also customers. Okay, let me put it this way: who may be stuck with, let's say, for example, an educational institution. It may be stuck with a lot of video cassette tapes, so they need VCRs. So now what happens in the decline stage? There could be only one company manufacturing VCRs. So you still have companies which manufacture VCRs, by the way. But what does that company do? It doesn't advertise much. Only once in a while, it may advertise, remind, oh yes, if you need VCR, we are there. So come to us. Now, what happens in a decline stage in terms of profit? The sole company can charge a premium now. So you tend to charge a premium in the introduction and growth stage, early growth stages, and you tend to charge a premium in the decline stage, because in the introduction and growth stage, you have caught the fancy of the target market. They want to buy the product. So you it is basically a market skimming pricing. Those who are willing to pay more by the innovators generally at this particular stage, early adapters and early adopters and innovators. What happens in a decline stage? Since you are the only company now which is selling VCRs, you can command a premium. So those who want to buy it, they will have to pay premium for that. This makes it very, very interesting. So today we'll be focusing on how top Indian brands bridge the gap between their business vision and actual consumer response. So this isn't all about the theory. We are actually going to be discussing through some practical frameworks. So we can see why strategic alignment matters. Strategic alignment is very, very critical. Every ad decision that we take must connect directly to a business objective, not exist in isolation. So this is one of the problems. Sometimes many of the advertising agencies are buoyed by the fact that what we need to do is we need to create an ad. We are a creative agency. Instead of focusing on what the ad should be all about, does it actually there's an alignment between the organizational objective or not? They create ads which obviously may win awards and creative accolades, but at the end of the day may not do the job for the company. So as you can see from the slide itself, there could be different objectives. Like for example, uh, let's look at the strategic objectives, the business objectives: become India's largest telecom. So ultimately, this has to, if you want to become the largest telecom company in India, you need to have a rapid subscriber acquisition. Now, obviously, you can finance your growth externally or internally. We are talking of Jio. Let's take the case study of Jio. Now, let's look at how Jio strategically aligned its strategy around the communication and advertising strategy. So, these companies could actually grow two ways. If they want to become, let's say the objective is to become the largest telecom company, the companies could do it in two ways. One, the company could very simply buy rival companies if they have got a lot of funds, which many companies did. Reliance Jio also did that. So what they did was they bought some small companies and they rapidly increased their subscriber base. But apart from that, what they did majorly is they created awareness about the affordable data and free voice services that they had. So Reliance is a very, very interesting case. So we'll use Reliance Jio to understand this. So we'll walk through our case, we'll start at the top. Business objective was Reliance's business objective was to, Reliance Jio's business objective was to become India's largest telecom operator. And that drove their marketing goal, that is rapid subscriber acquisition. So this is an example of a case study which led to the advertising objective. What is our advertising objective? To create awareness and create extensive awareness about two key value propositions which the company was, propagating. That is free voice calls and affordable data. So data even before the advent of Geo was pretty costly, and there were no free voice calls, by the way, at that point of time. I still remember in 2004, I went to Chennai. So that was the time when we came to know that you can call anybody across India at the same time. Uh, you know, and we all know about the roaming charges and all those things. So those who those who can recall those times, there used to be roaming charges. So if you travel from one place to another, like for example, if you're traveling from Aligarh to Delhi, as soon as you would enter uh, Greater Noida area, specifically the Noida and Delhi Expressway near Galgotias, and if you were just to travel 1 or 2 kilometer, you would get a message saying that now you are into the roaming area and you will be charged accordingly. So this benefit was something which was very, very meaningful to the consumer. Even though this was a new brand which was being launched and consumers were already using certain brands, a lot of people switched over to Jio because of this rapid subscription was because of the value proposition that they had: free voice calls and affordable data, which was not the case with the rest of the companies. And basically, this was the advertising objective, and creative strategy and consumer response actually started flowing from there. And the results are very, very clear for themselves: 100 million plus subscribers in just 6 months. So that's the fastest global growth ever in telecom history. And what was the key takeaway? The key takeaway wasn't just simple luck. It was disciplined alignment from the business strategy all the way down to the creative execution. Every decision enforced the same objective. So there was, I mean, I still remember the time when Jio was launched for the first time. Even though I had a what you call as Airtel connection, I got a, I got two Jio connections, by the way. So one of it I gave it to my wife, and I got one for myself. Why? Because they were offering something which nobody else was doing, and they were offering it for free. So, I mean, when you have such a super sales promotion and you have benefits, I mean, you have a benefits galore, who would not want to switch over? And that was the way through which Reliance was able to build the Reliance brand, Jio brand. Now, this is another example: Britannia Good Day. So if you look at this, once again, Britannia Good Day case study demonstrates how strategic advertising drives category dominance. So how Britannia Good Day became the category leader and how it became dominant in that particular. So they used a marketing funnel approach, as you can see from the slide. It was about they started with awareness, that is broad reach campaign to get the product in front of consumers, that is to convey that yes, we are there and we are manufacturing this brand. Then they moved, advertising led to trial, use sampling and promotions to get people to try the product. And they had this belief that our product is good. Once we make the consumers try the product, they will definitely buy it over and over, and positive word of mouth. And ultimately this actually happened, and they built, there was a lot of repeat purchases, and ultimately they were able to become the category leader. So what are the key insights here? When advertising objectives, awareness, preference, and trial are aligned to a single marketing goal, they compound into real measurable market share gains. And this isn't about isolated campaigns, it's about coordinated strategy where each stage builds on the previous one to drive sustainable growth. Now let's look at another, strategy in action, and that is premiumization strategy. And this is the brand that we have here is Tata Tea Gold. I'm sure many of you might have heard of this. We have Tata Tea Premium also and Tata Tea Gold. So what was this premiumization strategy? It wanted to move Tata Gold up the premium ladder from simple commodity tea. When Tata had initially launched, it was basically Tata Tea. So then later on, they made it to Tata Premium, slightly higher end product. Okay. So this ladder shows the product. So it was, what are the different, there are different segments. One is the regular tea, which is commodity low margin. Okay. You sell it like a commodity, merely as tea. And then you have branded tea, which has some recognition. Like, for example, if you go to a Kirana store in your city, what you can find is, like, for example, you go to Chowdi Bazaar or other places also, not exactly Chowdi Bazaar, it could be any place. You can find retailers selling unbranded tea. They say it's from Assam and or from Darjeeling, and you can buy the tea. It has no brand name. So what is the next step is, there is a brand name, like for example, Agni tea, Shakti tea. It doesn't convey anything superior about it, but it's merely the brand is used to differentiate that yes, we are Agni and we are Shakti. Nothing beyond that. Then you have premium tea. There is a quality perception that this tea is good. And then there is a question of taste. So the next level is the which Tata Tea focused on, moved from there, from premium, from branded tea to premium and to the last stage where you have the superior taste. Like for example, Wagh Bagri. So Wagh Bagri taste, again, it's all about very, very strong tea. So Tata Tea, regular Tata Tea had very low margins. But as they built brand recognition using advertising and quality perceptions, they reached the premium tea and ultimately they became Tata Gold. So Tata Tea now has got a Tata Tea premium quality also, and it has Tata Tea Gold also. So Tata Tea Gold is as costly as Brook Bond, or I should say it is as, Lipton or that Vahtaj thing. So Tata Tea sits at the top, commanding superior taste, positioning, and premium pricing with significant higher probability, profitability. So when you are premium, if you look at the profits, they are much more. See, the question that many of my students ask is, what is the difference between a luxury product and what is the difference between a mass market product? Now, if luxury was only making profit, everybody would be into luxury. So what I always tell my students is that luxury products per unit profit is very, very high, and the margin is very, very high. So you make something for 10 rupees and you sell it for 10,000 rupees. Whereas in the case of mass market product, the profit margin could be 5 paisa, 10 paisa, 20 paisa. But the ball game is all about the volumes. In luxury products, you sell one Rolls Royce in a month, or two Rolls Royce probably in a month, or one Rolls Royce in 2 months. But Maruti cars, you sell many a day across different agencies in India. For example, soap, tea, regular tea, matches, anything sugar, you sell a huge quantity. So ultimately, that 50 paisa multiplied by 1 million units sold in a month could be as good as, you know, 50,000, 1 million or 500,000 profit margin on one car. So that's how it works. So ultimately, it's all about understanding this equation. So it is not necessarily that if you are sitting at the top of the ladder, you are making more money. Rolls Royce is making more money as compared to Toyota. No. Toyota could be a bigger brand in terms of sales revenues, overall profits as compared to a Rolls Royce. But Rolls Royce's per unit profit is the highest. But the overall profit for the company would be calculated by multiplying per unit profit with the number of units sold. So Toyota does not command that much of a margin, but the number of units sold is definitely exponentially high as compared to a Rolls Royce. So what are the key things that we need to understand? Advertising has to build that quality perceptions, the perceptions that the company is trying to convey. In the case of Tata Tea Gold, it was about the superior taste, premium pricing was and high profitability could accrue because of this, because of the superior taste and the premiumness of the brand. They were able to convey with the help of advertising by having a premium advertising and by having a premium pricing policy, and obviously the packaging and everything. So if you look at the Tata Tea Gold, the packaging itself is different from the regular Tata Tea. And why? How is it different? You have a gold pack to distinguish that it is a premium brand. It is a premium quality tea, and not only premium quality in terms of how it tastes, but in terms of how it looks also. So what is the key insight here? The key insight here is premium positioning naturally commands higher margins. So advertising's job is to create the perception gap that justifies the price gap. Consumers will definitely pay more when they believe the product is genuinely superior. Now, Paytm is again a classic example of how drive adoption of a disruptive technology. In this case, digital payments in India. The key was education and trust building. These are two critical pillars for any new product, especially financial technology, because people are loath. Till date, I know people are not willing to use UPI payments. We are not willing to use credit cards. They're not willing to use debit cards because they think something is going to happen. I'll be cheated. I'll be robbed. Some sort of cyber fraud will happen with me. So trust is very, very important. So I mean, in case of fintech, it was Paytm spent a huge amount of money in creating awareness, understanding, trial, usage, and habit formation. Like for example, me, I have hardly used Paytm, but I use other, what you call as I'm a technology loving person, so I've always used such. I've been using debit cards ever since they came to India. I've been using ATMs ever since they came to India. I've been using online banking ever since it was made available. I've been using UPI payments ever since it has been made available. So everybody has a different, so consumer types are also different. You have innovators, you have early adopters, you have laggards, you have categories of consumers also. So, in case of Asian Paints is also a classic example how an incredible brand was built over a period of time. So there are many such examples that we can discuss, and so this brings us to an end as far as this particular session is concerned. And I hope you have been able to understand uh, the strategic alignment of business objectives with advertising objectives. So there is always, remember, there is a hierarchy of objectives starting from the hierarchy of objectives starts from the corporate objectives. From corporate objectives to the business. For example, if it's a conglomerate business, so it will, if it is a conglomerate, then it will be a strategic business unit. We took the example of Reliance Jio in our when we are talking of a strategic business unit. Within the business unit, you will have different departments. All the departments will be aligned to achieve the organizational objective. So marketing will be aligned to achieve the organizational objective. Similarly, advertising will be aligned to achieve the marketing objective. Similarly, the creative objectives or the creative strategy will be aligned to achieve or the media strategy will be aligned to achieve the advertising objectives. So that is the hierarchy of the objectives. So thank you, and we will meet in the next sessions.